unlike Kestrel, I moved from Netherlands actually to Slovenia a year and a half ago on a small 2-acre farm with my husband. So we can start the presentation now. And that's why I called it Coming Home. And it's more of a personal journey, how I reconnected back with the land of my family, and how Morak was a great inspiration and a mentor for me and still is on my permaculture journey. So we are based on 800 meters here in a very small country. And it's something that I always wanted to do, but I always thought that the world is a more interesting place and then I have to explore and explore. And after living in US, China, and in the last 8 years in Netherlands, where I had the kind of a dream job in the sustainability field, something grew inside me that there was so much discontent with what I was doing and how I was living, that then Corona was a relief. And we came back to Slovenia for a month. And after 18 months, we are still here on my parents' farm. We live in a house on my mom's property. And I decided that that's the time now. That's the time now to learn how to be a small farmer again and use the knowledge of my ancestors and the permaculture to run that farm. So the first thing that I did, and it's the first principle, was really observe with the new eyes, with the eyes from the world coming back to the land with my husband, and discovering a lot of patterns that I wouldn't see before when I was growing up here as a kid. One of the things that I had a chance in 18 months to see really how the system of farming is really, really meant for a destruction and not from really nature conservation. When I walk into the forest and I see the amount of monoculture, the amount of new roads, the amount of fertilizers, is quite heartbreaking, but it's also on the one hand a relief. That is how it is. I worked on the direct correctives for all my life. There is one solution for this, there is one solution for that. And now finally, I can be quietly here with the land and inspire people through that to maybe adopt different kind of practices. So that's how my permaculture journey started. Murak, you are a bit fast. Oh, okay. This is the family that grew up on that farm. That farm is 4 hectares originally and fed 9 people. All the seeds, all the plants were native. The kitchen garden, the house, everything was actually based on the permaculture principles in the 50s. So that's only 2 generations ago, where my grandparents were able to raise a family of 7 kids here. On the right side, the youngest one is my mother, who still lives here. So just going back and looking at how they created the food forest, how they created the farmland, how they left the land for the wilderness. And it was all kind of a common sense, because that's how you can really permanently cultivate this land without any, let's say, external input. So for me, coming now with a lot of new ideas and of course with a lot of new energy, there is a challenge here now, how to start combining the old and the new. We live in a very, very steep part, so there is a lot of things that we have to do with our hands, and it cannot be done with the machinery. But we are trying with my husband to gently start introducing safer ways of farm this land, and to make sure that not everything gets just outgrown as a forest, but that we honor the traditions and the cultures of managing the land before. So I made 2 examples here. Here is one. We reopened one of the lands that my grandfather had an oat field before, in a very old way of reopening the land, and now it's becoming a no-dig garden. But we had to use a very old tool to do that, because the land is very, very steep. So kind of a no-dig from the start was not something we could do, but we tried with another thing. And here we introduced, for example, the mulching. So how to keep these really, really steep meadows for bees and insects going on without being overgrown with the forest. And we tried with the robot, which is a much safer way for the farmers, so they don't have to ride the tractors on these lands anymore. So these are the 2 kind of the things that are kind of in my head, itching all the time in my head. How can we weave the traditions into these new patterns and keep these lands as beautiful as they are, but much more abundant and biodiverse. Here is one thing that I think we talk a lot as small farmers to it, our social life, how you always need to have a liter of wine and an hour of time when the neighbor stops by, because we are so codependent here. We cannot do everything alone. We don't have the machinery. We don't have enough hands. So you always need to have a time when somebody stops by to have a chat, and then you go again and work. So that social part, for me, reading all the books always came out as a very important one. This was my first garden that I started. My mom gave me like on the edges of the land a piece and said, you know, you do with it whatever you want. And I really started to experiment how it is to cultivate for all life, not just for food for humans, but how to really have enough flowers, enough medicinal plants, and then of course enough food for our animals and ourselves. And this is a piece of land that is actually making me very happy every day. I also learned how, you know, stupid almost I was in terms of how to grow things from seeds and not just by seedling. So this is my second season and I'm becoming more successful in growing from the native seeds and collecting seeds and then putting them in the land without the greenhouse yet. I'm trying to use all the energy that comes to the house in order to pre-grow what goes out on the land. Then the winters are very long here and the summers are short. I was very inspired by Murak's story and the chickens in the permaculture course. So we also now have 5 chickens, and it is and we are actually managing a piece of land with these chickens that would otherwise not be useful. So we are trying to bring more diversity to that piece of land while having them as residents there grazing happily over the summer, and then using them on the fields later on in the autumn, and then hopefully preserving them against the fogs during the winter. Here are the 2 woofies, family woofies that came this summer. We have to collect all the hay with our hands because we have sheep. And honestly, it feels very good that we actually also have to work for the animals, that it's not just that we have animals there to use them, but there is a closed cycle with who does what for who. And that at the end, that kind of an ecosystem works here on these couple of hectares. One of the things that I just wanted to show, and it actually came to me after all these years of visiting this land, it's a slide before, is that what means harvesting abundance. And the harvesting abundance for me is really, first of all, having time to notice that abundance, because the field of the garlic, Murak, there's just one slide before, the field of the wild garlic here next to our house has been there for almost 50 years. So I've been growing next to it and never really noticed it, how much of the wild garlic in 2 months it grows and we can harvest. And via this course, actually, I started to, kind of record these things and saying like, oh my God, if there are places where you leave nature alone, look what actually gives to you or offers to you. It's very beautiful. So I've been an activist almost all my life in the environmental field. And, I talked a lot to people what they need to do and lived the lifestyle that was very different to what I was talking about. And for the first time now, I feel that, I can get people more, maybe less people, but deeply, maybe with a deeper commitment via my own doing, not via my own talking. So that's what we are trying here with my husband, is to prototype really different ways of models and to see if that small farming in Slovenia that, is kind of really on the side. The farms are closing. Nobody wants to do it anymore because it is very hard and there's very, very little money out there for it. Like, what can we do to basically inspire our next generation, but also farmers around us that are now taking on the farms and that would start actually applying different concepts and not just thinking in terms of how many cows and how much forest they can cut in order to survive. So I experienced through this year and a half is really how powerful it is to have your own land, and it is a privilege, but it's also a responsibility because we have it now. We have to farm it in the way that it's going to be for many next generations, and how great it is to break the rules and do things differently on your land where nobody can tell you that you are not supposed to do it this way. So I really tried that this would become kind of a, weaving pattern that would go in our surroundings and multiply and grow in the future in a way that I guess nature would do it. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, Mihela. That was absolutely gorgeous. Is there anyone who, Dee, I think your hand is up from before. I'm just going to pop that down. Is there anyone who'd like to jump in straight up and respond to Mihela's presentation? Clinton, go ahead.
Thanks, Mihela. Those photographs also were so fantastic. And just keeping it simple, just one or two words, it really kind of captivated. And, you know, I like that each one of the presentations tonight was unique in that way, but I really appreciated your kind of bold and yet really captivating style of those photographs. One question that I do have is like being able to kind of produce and get an abundance on that kind of slope. Did you come across any kind of challenges with doing that?
Yeah, so first of all, the photographs were taken by my friend Matt, who came here for 3 weeks, and that's why I also wanted to do the presentation now. I said we will have better photos, so let's do it now. Yes, of course, you know, on these slopes is the challenge is how you prepare for the work, because once you go up to the slope and if you forget something, you need to go again. And I must say, being in front of the computer for 20 years, the physical part of working on this slope, it's very challenging for me. I had to completely readjust my way of how I think about my to-do lists, and with my family and also with their help. So I resonate a lot with the woofies and the experiences of this. We also try to get, first of all, now more Dutch families and people who would like to be in the nature and help us. But organizationally, it is challenging, and especially because we are also just learning. I think I try to write more about this now too on my social media, because I don't want people to have just a romantic view of how it is going back to the farm. There are a lot of very practical views that you have to be ready for them, so you don't leave after a year, because we were considering it. We were considering it. But, you know, I don't want to go and live in the city anymore. And I think my husband kind of now is there too. This is not what we want to do. We want to be here. We want to have animals. We want to work hard, but also smart. So we can at least be sufficient in terms of the 3 families that are in that smaller circle. And then kind of co-sufficient with other farmers in the village. That what we don't produce, we exchange with them. And that, I guess, in a year or 2, we would be able to run a model where this is possible. We still have a lot to go. But yeah, the hills are really, really challenging, and you know, they are commercially not attractive for any tool producers, right? Because it's too small. I mean, it's us and Austria, basically a little bit of Italy in Europe, I'm talking, and the rest, nobody is doing things in the hills anymore. Everything is on the flat land. And then, yeah, now, for example, this summer here, it's the most dry summer ever. Even us, we are in the valley, so we have water coming from everywhere, but it's still very dry. So when the next rain comes, if you're on the hill, and even if you manage your soil very good, when the crazy rain comes, a lot of it goes. So, yeah. There is a lot that you can learn from the books, but then actually you need to be, I guess, on the land, on the soil for a couple of years to really know how to farm it in a way with nature, rather than, you know, trying to fight the nature.
And I think too, what you're saying as well about, you know, inviting in the neighbors, and when they come by, to stop and have a cup. There's so much to learn from one another around. I did a podcast interview with Rob Pekin, who's the farmer who started up this amazing local food network here in Brisbane. He grew up on a dairy farm, and his mother taught him that hospitality thing. Like, whenever anyone comes in, the kettle goes on. It's always time for a cup of tea when someone comes over, or to sit down and have a meal. And that social side of keeping people, I guess, buoyant as well too. I mean, I think too, in their particular community, it was something really important about staying connected when there is that isolation. So yeah, absolutely. I think that aspect of it was really, really great. Somali and Joe have got their hands up. I just wanted to acknowledge that it has gone 8. I would love for us to be able to make space to have a couple more questions here, but I do also acknowledge if you do need to pop off, because we've kind of finished the time that we set aside for this. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that. Somali, go ahead. Nice to see you here.
Thank you very much. My name is Ismail Nyange from Kakuma Refugee Camp. And I love both the presentation, one for Kestra and also Hid. I just have a question, because first of all, about your presentation, I love because you just go straight to the permaculture principles, of which you care for diversity and what it is so lovely. And also doing farming in a small scale, it is a major area where permaculture we do focus on. So my question is, I see there is also you have a poultry farming, which you put in your small scale. And we here, we have tried, we do try to have poultry farming, but it become a major challenge in terms of feeding them so that they can have food, in terms of creating a food. So my question is, how do you feed those poultry as a small chicks? How do you feed them apart from the plant which you plant in your farm? Thank you.
Thanks, Somali.
Thank you. So I do want to make sure that we only for now have 6 chickens. Like I calculated that would be enough eggs for us and the family that lives here. I didn't want to go wider yet, and because we have a lot of margins between the like nut trees, old nut trees and forest, and there is some land where for decades they would be just putting like kind of gravel on from the other meadows. I turned that land actually in a quite like a big chicken grazing area. So I also picked the species of chicks that are feeding outside. So for me that was very important, and in Slovenia that's quite part of the like kind of a cultural tradition of having chickens that are grazing in your backyard. You know, so I had 2 last year, and that backyard idea didn't come through very well because they would come in front of the kitchen and shit everywhere, and that I couldn't take. So then I moved them a little bit away, but that I can still see them because they are very social. So I guess the sort, the species is very important, and then yeah, the ones that can really rely on the food that they find outside. So I still feed them corn, a little bit for eggs, but not much more. Yeah. So and for us here, really, we are enough in the wild that there are a couple of other animals that are very keen to get in. So I have to really protect the flock. And now it's easy in the summer, but I think in the winter we'll have more battles to keep them. And just so you know, in European Union, before when we were listening to Kester, how good they are and subsidies, they also now are discussing a crazy law where they will start actually monitoring the amount of chickens you have as an individual, and they'll chip them just the same as the chip cows and other animals. So like this is really going beyond any common sense, that for free chickens you will need to have inspector coming, that you will need to also cover the cost of them. So they really try. I think in the back, on the front they act like the self-sufficiency is important, but on the back they do really try to protect any more advanced steps for people to actually become self-sufficient. So
fantastic, thank you. I've just noticed there's a people saying in the chat, I'll come and visit you and work with you. That's nice. You're close enough to do that.
Bring good shoes so you can go up.
Yeah. Joe, you had a question as well. Did you want to jump in now?
Sure. Yeah, I thought it was so beautiful, Mihela, just stunning photographs, and lovely to hear your personal journey. I guess I was going to comment on what Morag commented on about how lovely it was, the photo of the 2 old men having a glass of wine. And that reminded me of that, yeah, the critical importance of balancing the really hard labor with the social aspect. Even when you think you can't stop, whenever you do, you realize how important it is. So that was really powerful for me to see. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I think the social aspect and the aspect of which is not very usual in Slovenia, to create spaces on the farm that are really beautiful, and they are there just for beauty sometimes. They don't have other function, like, you know, a set of flowers somewhere, or, you know, a painted birdhouse, or something that you can stop and breathe a little bit and look at something nice. I think I've really also tried to do that, because these two, social aspect and the beauty aspect, for me is something that really keeps you going. You know, when you have bad days, when the tractor breaks down, when nothing works, when you don't know how to fix it, then you go sit in a nice corner and think, we'll do it tomorrow.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely so important. And I think, you know, I hope that it's something that's come through as I talk about design through the course, about not just designing for the plants and the chickens and all that, but designing for you. Like, where's the heart? Where are those spaces that take you out and embed you deeply in your garden? It's wrapped around you and holds you there in that space, and the people who come. It's so important. And also, I did have another question. I don't know where that question went. Oh yes, the question that I was wanting to ask you was around this idea of the transition that you made from the kind of the corporate city life into where you are now. And is this something that you're noticing many people are doing where you are, or how have your friends and people from your former life responding to what you're doing? I'm just curious, that's all.
Yeah, you know, I think the corporate life has so many perks that they keep people there, that there's a lot of fear about stepping on the other side. So I started now also to write a blog, and these photos and everything, we are trying to make some kind of publication around it to give people more courage, because, you know, a lot of things is possible. And I think a lot of people suffer in the corporate world today because they are in such fight with what they do and how they would like to live, especially after Corona. Yeah, so I actually had a lot of, in my office, a lot of people quit in these 2 years. And when we are in the contact, and the transitions are hard. They are very hard. You know, coming back home, living 100 meters from your parents, you love them, but, you know, you see them now every day. They have their own idea about how to work on the land, and you kind of have to have a balancing act going on all the time. Also with husbands, with spouses, we worked together before with Robert on some nice projects. You know, we facilitated some workshops for activists. Now we have to work every day together. It's a very different context and the way we approach work than before. So it's a lot. I feel my days are, you know, the time just goes, and I hardly breathe in between from one project to another, from one maybe a little family tension to another very big family happiness. So I feel honestly the life now, maybe money wise not rich, but everything else wise so rich that I always say I'm not going to work for anyone anymore. I want to work. I want to do this, and I want to figure it out how I can do this so we can live here.
Thank you so much for sharing, Mihela. And thank you everyone who has shared today. Joe, Kestrel, Mihela, all three of you have presented such a beautiful collective of ideas and inspirations and thought provocations and a warmth around, you know, making these transitions to a more permaculture way of life, what it means, what it looks like, how it can happen, what challenges you face. And I think it's really wonderful to explore all of that. And I know that you had links, Mihela, to your blog at the end of your presentation. I wonder whether you might just be able to type it in the chat now so that people can follow that. And thank you to all of you who are here as well, part of these conversations. It's so lovely to see all your faces and to hear your voices. I really love these sessions. Great. Okay, so there it is. And thank you for sticking around a little bit longer than we planned. I think I just felt natural to, in time-wise, to keep going.